Hello, boys and girls. Today we are going to be reading a story called Dr. DeSoto. This story is by William Stagg and it's shared with permission by Macmillan Publishing. As we're reading the story today, there might be some words in this story that you don't know. So I wanted to go ahead and tell you about these words. So this first word here is hoist. Hoist. Can you say that word? Hoist. Hoist means to use a mechanical object to lift something up high. If you have a tree house with a bucket hanging down, your mom could put something in it for you to hoist up to the tree house. Sometimes when we drive, we see large cranes with cables and pulleys to hoist large things in the air. So you might have seen one of these machines hoisting something up. Hoist means to lift up by using a mechanical tool. Another word from our story is timid. Timid means you're fearful or shy. A person who is timid tries to stay away from scary things. If you're timid, you might not like being in crowds of new people or trying new things or sometimes sharing or answering in front of other people. You might feel timid if you had to go to a brand new school and didn't know anybody. Timid means shy or not bold around people or dangerous situations. Our next word is a morsel. Can you say that word? Morsel. Another word we will hear is morsel. A morsel is a tiny amount of food, just one bite. Your mom or dad might cut a block of cheese into bite-sized pieces. We could say you're eating a morsel of cheese. I also think about a bag of chocolate chips, and each chocolate chip is called a morsel. They're really small. If a mouse finds tiny crumbs, you might say the mouse has a morsel of food. A morsel is one little bite-sized piece of food. Another word from today's story is quiver. In today's story, quiver is a verb that means to shake with small, fast movements. When you quiver, your body moves a little. If you walk through a haunted house and you felt scared, you might start to shake or quiver with fear. And dogs, sometimes when they see delicious food, they start to quiver and shake a bit because they want to eat it. Quiver means to tremble or shake just a little. As we're reading this story today, we are going to work on the skill of making predictions that we learned this week. Remember, predictions are guesses about what could happen next in the story. Good readers can use clues from the text and pictures to help them make predictions. We can use the title and cover to make predictions before we read, the events to make predictions while we read, and we can think back about the book to make predictions after finishing the story. So, in this story right here, Dr. DeSoto, I see that there is a mouse and he's working on somebody's teeth and he's got a special chair. I know that if you become a dentist, you have to go to school for a long time. So I'm thinking that he's not young. And it's a lot of work. You have to study hard to be a dentist. So I'm thinking he's really smart. And because he's a mouse, I'm sure that he works on animals that don't want to eat a mouse. He wouldn't be able to work on things that like meat. So those are my predictions in the story. Dr. DeSoto is smart, he's older, and he works on animals that don't want to eat him. So let's read the story and see if my predictions are correct. Dr. DeSoto, the dentist, did very good work. So he had no end of patients. Those close to his own size, moles, chipmunks, etc., sat in the regular dentist chair. Larger animals sat on the floor, while Dr. DeSoto stood on a ladder. For extra large animals, he had a special room. There, Dr. DeSoto was hoisted up to his patient's mouse by his assistant, who happened to be his wife. So you can see the pulley system they used to hoist him up to large animals' mouths. Dr. DeSoto was especially popular with big animals. He was able to work inside their mouths wearing rubber to keep his feet dry. And his fingers were so delicate and his drills so dainty or tiny, they could hardly feel any pain. Being a mouse, he refused to treat animals dangerous to mice, and it said so on his sign. When the doorbell rang, he and his wife would look out the window. They wouldn't admit even the most timid looking cat. Why wouldn't you let a cat in? You're right, because cats like to eat mice. So my prediction so far is correct that he doesn't want any animals to come in to be treated that would eat him. And I was right that he's pretty good at what he's doing. One day when they looked out, they saw a well-dressed fox with a flannel bandage around his jaw. I can't treat you, sir, Dr. DeSoto shouted. Sir, haven't you read my sign? Please, the fox wailed. Have mercy, I'm suffering. And he wept so bitterly it was pitiful to see. What do you think wailed means based on the picture and what I read? Yeah, it says wept, and I can see tears, so wailed means he cried. Just a moment, said Dr. DeSoto. The poor fox, he whispered to his wife. What shall we do? Let's risk it, said Mrs. DeSoto. She pressed the buzzer and let the fox in. I'm going to stop here and make a prediction, because I know Dr. DeSoto didn't want to have animals in that like to eat mice. And when I read stories, often the fox is very tricky in the story. So I'm not thinking it's a good idea that Dr. DeSoto lets him in, and I think the fox might trick him. So we'll continue reading and see if my prediction's correct. He was up the stairs in a flash. Bless your little hearts, he cried, falling to his knees. I beg you, do something. My tooth is killing me. Sit on the floor, sir, said Dr. DeSoto, and remove the bandage, please. Dr. DeSoto climbed up the ladder and bravely entered the fox's mouth. Owie! He gasped. The fox had a rotten bicuspid and unusually bad breath. This tooth will have to come out, Dr. DeSoto announced, but we can make you a new one. Just stop the pain, whimpered the fox, wiping some tears away. Despite his misery, he realized he had a tasty little morsel in his mouth, and his jaw began to quiver. Keep open, yelled Dr. DeSoto. Wide open, yelled his wife. So I was right. This fox might want to eat the Dr. DeSoto, but I'm going to revise my prediction because right now I'm thinking he wasn't going to trick Dr. DeSoto. It just happened that he can't help himself. I'm giving you gas now, said Dr. DeSoto. You won't feel a thing when I yank that tooth. Soon the fox was in dreamland. Yummy, he mumbled. How I love them raw with a pinch of salt and a dry white wine. They could guess what he was dreaming about. Mrs. DeSoto handed her husband a pole to keep the fox's mouth open. I'm making a prediction here that even though they put the fox to sleep, he might. Dr. DeSoto fastened his extractor to the bad tooth. Then he and his wife began turning the winch. Finally, with the sucking sound, the tooth popped out and hung swaying in the air. I'm bleeding, the fox yelped when he came to. Dr. DeSoto ran up the ladder and stuffed some gauze in the hole. The worst is over, he said. I'll have your new tooth ready tomorrow. Be here at 11 sharp. The fox, still woozy, said goodbye and left. On his way home, he wondered if it would be shabby of him to eat Dr. DeSoto when the job was done. So my prediction's right. He might want to still eat him. After office hours, Mrs. DeSoto molded a tooth of pure gold and polished it. Raw with salt indeed, muttered Dr. DeSoto. How foolish to trust a fox. Ha! He didn't know what he was saying, said Mrs. DeSoto. Why should he harm us? We're helping him. Because he's a fox, said Dr. DeSoto. They're wicked, wicked creatures. That night the DeSotos lay awake worrying. Should we let him in tomorrow, Mrs. DeSoto wondered. Once I start a job, said the dentist firmly, I finish it. My father was the same way. But we must do something to protect ourselves, said his wife. They talked and talked until they formed a plan. I think it will work, said Dr. DeSoto. A minute later, he was snoring. I'm wondering what their plan is. There has to be something to make sure that he doesn't get eaten while he's in his mouth. The next morning, promptly at 11, a very cheerful fox turned up. He was feeling not a particle of pain. When Dr. DeSoto got into his mouth, he snapped it shut for a moment. Then he opened it wide and laughed. Just a joke, he chortled. That means you laugh. Be serious, said the dentist sharply. We have work to do. His wife was lugging the heavy tooth up the ladder. Oh, I love it, exclaimed the fox. It's just beautiful. Dr. DeSoto set the gold tooth in its socket and hooked it up to the teeth on both sides. The fox caressed the new tooth with his tongue. It feels good, he thought. I really shouldn't eat them. On the other hand, how can I resist? We're not finished, said Dr. DeSoto, holding up a large jug. I have here a remarkable preparation developed only recently by my wife and me. With just one application, you can be rid of toothaches forever. How would you like to be the first one to receive this unique treatment? So I think this might be their trick. My prediction is that if they put this in his mouth won't be able to open the rest of the time he's in the doctor's office. Let's see if my prediction's right. I certainly would, the fox declared. I'd be honored. He hated any kind of personal pain. You will never have to see us again, said Dr. DeSoto. No one will see you again, the fox said to himself. He definitely made up his mind to eat them with the help of his brand new tooth. Dr. DeSoto stepped into the fox's mouth with a bucket of secret formula and proceeded to paint each tooth. He hummed as he worked. Dr. DeSoto stood by the ladder, pointing out spots he had missed. The fox looked very happy. Oh, I'm going with my prediction that I think he's painting on some kind of glue on his teeth. Let's see if I'm right. When the dentist was done, he stepped out. Now close your jaws tight, he said, and keep them closed for a full minute. The fox did as he was told. Then he tried to open his mouth, but his teeth were stuck together. Excuse me, I should have mentioned, said Dr. DeSoto. You won't be able to open your mouth for a day or two. The secret formula must first permeate the dentine. But don't worry, no pain ever again. The fox was stunned. He stared at Dr. DeSoto, then at his wife. They smiled and waited. All they could do was say, Frank O. Berry Mush, through his clenched teeth, and got up and left. He tried to do so with dignity. Then he stumbled down the stairs in a daze. Dr. DeSoto and his assistant held out Fox the Fox. They kissed each other and took the rest of the day off. So as I was making predictions in this story, I thought to myself that the fox was going to be tricky. And I thought he came with a plan to already eat them. So I had to revise my prediction and decide that the fox just can't help but eat animals that it sees. And then I knew that Dr. DeSoto was pretty smart, and he sure proved that. I wasn't sure what the trick was at first. I thought they were going to use something to hold his mouth open. But then when I saw that paint, I knew they were gluing his mouth shut. So as I read the story, I revised my predictions and came up with new ones based on what I know and what's in the text. So good readers stop and make predictions about the story like we did. That's how you're able to better understand a story if you think about the stories you read. I can't wait to hear how you start to make predictions as you're reading stories on Raz Kids or at home with your parents. Your teachers would love to hear about your awesomeness in making predictions.